is the Blueberry Learning Farm. I've lived here since 2007. We're an intentional community of 3 houses of intentional neighbors and more intentional neighbors across the street. The garden space is partly private and partly shared. There's a community garden in the front yard of the house next door, which is why I'm pointing that way. The houses across the street also do gardening, though not quite as ambitiously as we do. I would say the houses on this side of the street, the ambition is to be something of a demonstration of regenerative agriculture and low-impact living. We've naturalized a lot of stuff, which means stuff that we planted a long time ago that's now growing in other places. These old fruit trees that are behind you came with the place. They're probably 50 or 60 years old. And all the other fruit trees were planted since 2007. This class will be a mix of show and tell, looking at plants that are in the garden and also stuff that's over there. Hands-on practice of mostly seed processing, and super nerdy theory. And the super nerdy theory will be like us standing around talking. Unfortunately, me standing around talking, which I'm not that into, but the super nerdy theory helps us understand whether we're going to get the seeds that make the plants that we want to have. It doesn't have to be food, but whatever the plant is that you want to have. And so there's going to be a certain amount of standing around talking, and there's charts in the handout. There's different versions of the species chart, and that's going to be important. The first thing about super nerdy theory, a couple of you said, I've saved the things that are easy. That's a really good idea. And so the plants that are easy are the ones where you don't have to be really picky about all the super nerdy theory. And so I divided them into 4 categories, from easiest to we don't usually do that. The easiest ones are the ones where the part we eat is also the ripe fruit. Because when the fruit is ripe, the seeds are ready. And the other thing that's special about these ones is that we don't have to worry about any of the crossing issues. So tomatoes and peppers, which are closely related to each other, and beans and peas. Then the next easiest are plants where we don't have to worry about all the super nerdy theory, except that the part we eat doesn't contain ripe seeds. And so I listed lettuce, spinach, and leeks as examples of that. You have to wait for it to bolt and make seeds. And then you have to wait for the seeds. You have to know that the seeds are ripe. The trickiest ones are the ones where we have to worry about whether it's going to cross with some other crop that gives you a different thing. And so here I listed beets, cauliflower, and acorn squash. Those are just a few examples, and I'll talk about why. Maybe you all already know why, but I'll talk about why. Those are extra tricky. And then when I was coordinating this class with someone else who's actually not here, and I realized that it would be good to talk about why we don't usually grow fruit trees from seed. So that's the 4th category, which isn't even in the handout, of the we don't really do that. You can. It would be an interesting experiment. If you take that pit that's inside your prune and you plant it, you will probably get a plum tree, but you won't get an Italian prune. Because fruit trees are usually grafted, and the rootstock makes a different tree. And when you plant the seed is genetically identical to the rootstock, not to the fruit. I won't go really in this is that would be 2 hours to talk about why that is. But if you've ever seen a seedling or a root sucker from a fruit tree, you'll see that it makes different fruit, or like with roses, which are sometimes grafted, the root suckers have different leaves and different flowers. This is the Italian prune. This is the root sucker fruit. They're both plums, but they're totally different. So let's move on to all of the planning issues. This is the super nerdy theory. So first I'm just going to list them. Crossing. Getting the plant that you thought you were going to get. That's one planning issue. The question is, how can I know if my seed will breed true? The second issue is selection. I think my seed will breed true, but how do I choose the best individual parent plants to save seed from? So that's selection. The third one, since this is planning, we're planning our garden for seed saving, but we're also planning our garden for food. People want to know, can I eat from my seed parent plants? And then the last important planning issue is, when do I harvest my seeds? How can I tell when it's time to harvest them? All right, so we're gonna do this, some of it standing here, and then we'll also walk around and look at stuff. So, besides grafted trees do not breed true, or grafted rose bushes, or grafted tomato plants, grafted things do not breed true. Hybrids also do not breed true. Some people feel like hybrids are bad. Hybrids aren't necessarily, that's a matter of opinion. What is true is that if you have a plant that is a hybrid between two different parents that are different from each other, you don't know whether the seed you save will be more like one parent plant, or more like the other parent plant, or more like the one that you got the seed from, or some mixture of characteristics. But again, it might be great. You just don't know exactly what it's going to be. And then we're going to talk about outcrossing versus self-fertile, and we're going to look at the super nerdy chart about outcrossing and what crosses with what. So I'm going to read this sentence, line 3. Crops interbreed easily if they are outcrossing and the same species. Outcrossing means that the individual plant cannot pollinize itself. It needs a friend.
Okay.
The friend of the same species. So an example of that would be
Kiwis?
Kiwis are dioecious. That's a separate issue. They're not only outcrossing but also dioecious, which means there are plants that have male flowers and plants that have female flowers. But tomatillos have perfect flowers, which means we're using the male and female is the botanical definition of male and female. They have the antheridia make sperm, and the pistil has the ovary in it. And there are some flowers that have both of those in the same flower, and that's called a perfect flower because it has all the parts it needs. And you also need the plant to be self-fertile, which means that its flowers can pollinize each other. It doesn't need another plant. So a squash plant has imperfect flowers. Some of the flowers are male and some of them are female, but they can pollinize each other. If you have one zucchini plant, you still get zucchini. A tomatillo plant has perfect flowers, meaning it has pistils and stamens in the same flower, but the plant needs another tomatillo plant to pollinize it. So outcrossing is when the plant needs another plant of the same species. Usually when people say that you need, what they really mean is you'll get more fruit if you have two. Blueberries are an example of that. If you have one blueberry bush, you'll probably get blueberries. But if you have two blueberry bushes, you'll get more than twice as many blueberries because they'll be pollinizing each other. Corn is outcrossing. If you have one corn plant, you will not get any corn. The corn has male pollen at the top and female pistils at the bottom, but that corn plant cannot pollinize itself. It needs at least one other corn plant. Usually the popular wisdom is that you need a block of corn about 10 feet square to get good pollination, meaning every corn plant makes good ears. And so if you have a giant cornfield like you see in the Midwest, most of those ears will get filled because it's all one big mass of corn pollen. Whereas if you just have a few corn plants, you might not get very much corn. It relies on being pollinated by another plant, and because it's wind pollinated, it crosses so readily.
Oh.
Yeah.
It would.
The pollen can blow miles.
Wow.
In fact, it's a big problem with organic farmers having their corn crops contaminated with GMO corn from a neighbor's field.
Oh.
So outcrossing and self-fertile are opposites.
Okay.
A tomato plant is self-fertile. and has perfect flowers. A squash plant is self-fertile but has imperfect flowers, but the plant is self-fertile. So any plant that's self-fertile, you just need one plant, and it's more likely to pollinize itself. So sometimes that means it's less likely to be pollinized by another plant, but not necessarily. And the super nerdy chart on the last page of your handout, one of the columns will tell you what it's the fourth column tells you what it's pollinated by, which tells you how far it's going to go. And then also, if it says out, that means it can't pollinize itself. If it says self, then it means it's very likely to pollinize itself. So one of the reasons that lettuce is easy to save seed from is that an individual lettuce plant is very likely to pollinize itself. Tomatoes are notoriously true breeding, so if you get a tomato from the grocery store and it's not a hybrid, and it's not a Terminator crop, then the seeds will probably give you the same kind of tomato.
Heirloom.
I was just
So
gonna
that,
say
yeah, if it's an heirloom
they say
variety.
heirloom.
It's good to know what family it's in, but that will not determine whether it crosses. Two things from the same family cannot cross, but to cross, they need to be the same species. So here's where it gets tricky. You've probably heard that the squash vine growing out of your compost pile will not make good squashes. That's not entirely true, but what is true is the squash vine growing out of your compost pile will not make the same kind of squash that you threw into the compost. The definition of a species, the botanical or I guess zoological, if we were talking about animals, definition of a species is that they can interbreed and make viable offspring. So when we say that two plants are the same species, that's what that means. And so two different lettuce plants are both the same species. They're both Lactuca sativa, but they're not the same species as Radicchio, Chicorium intybus. It's not even the same genus, so they won't cross with each other. Now, red lettuce and green lettuce can cross with each other, but they often don't. Lettuces are just really good at pollinizing themselves. So a pollinator is a thing that carries pollen around, like a bee or the wind. A pollinizer is a plant that provides pollen. When we're talking about a species, it has two words, and the first word is the genus, and the second word is the species. And sometimes when people have had to say the genus over and over again, they started using the first letter of the genus as an abbreviation. Or to save space, because Brassica oleracea wouldn't fit on that line because it's too long. So where it says B. oleracea, that's Brassica oleracea, and then go over to column 3, which it's actually 2 lines: broccoli, kale, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, kohlrabi, cauliflower. All the same species. If you have kale and broccoli and Brussels sprouts and you let all them flower all at once, you'll probably get kale, because kale is the wild type, and broccoli, Brussels sprouts, and cabbage are all refined selections from kale that somebody bred 1,000 years ago.
Interesting. Strong plant breeding.
Yeah. So if you want to keep it simple, if you have brassica seeds, it's probably going to be kale.
So this influences where you plant things. Knowing this kind of thing would influence where you plant things.
It wouldn't influence where you plant them. It would influence whether you let them flower. Or whether you try to save seed from them. Because bees can fly really far. Kale is things with showy yellow flowers are usually pollinated by bees, and bees can fly really far. So if you want to save seed from broccoli, either you make sure that there's nobody anywhere in your neighborhood letting any other Brassica oleracea flower at the same time, or you isolate it with a cage, and then you have to you can do the paintbrush method. There's various advanced pollination techniques, or advanced isolation and pollination techniques that you can do. There is more than one species of squash, and there are thousands of varieties of squash. The largest of the books on the table over there has a long list of different squash varieties. And the ones that you have to be the most careful about are the ones that are the same species as zucchini, which the ones you would be familiar with would be acorn and delicata squash and pie pumpkins. They're all Cucurbita pepo, and that will cross with zucchini and yellow crookneck squash and many of our summer squashes. And so not only will you not get the same variety, but you might not get a good winter squash. It might be more like an overgrown zucchini. You might get lucky and get some really cool hybrid. That did happen to me once. I got this thing that grew out of the compost, and it made what looked like a zucchini, and then it got bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it turned black, and it looked like this giant black zucchini. And I cut it open, and inside the flesh, I let it mature. I let it get fully ripe and dried down, stem dried down, and I cut it open. The flesh inside was orange and sweet and starchy and tasted like an acorn squash. I got lucky.
Wow, how fun.
But if it's one of the other squash species that doesn't include any summer squash, that's all good winter squashes, like Cucurbita maxima includes kabocha and buttercup and a bunch of different long-lasting winter keepers that have sweet, starchy flesh and big seeds. And so if one of those rots in your compost and a vine grows out of the compost, you're not sure which of those it'll give you, but it's more likely to be something that's a big, starchy, sweet winter squash. So this crossing thing, the reason it's important to know is if you have your heart set on saving seed and the seed giving you what you want next year, you want to be sure that either what you're saving seed from is something that doesn't cross, like the lettuce and the tomatoes and the peppers, or if you really, really want to save seed from your prize pumpkin, you're going to have to do the fancy hand pollination techniques. Back to the squash versus the kale. When I say the crop, I mean the part of the plant that you eat. If the part of the plant that you eat is a fruit, it's more likely to have seeds in it that are viable, which means it's more likely to have crossed with something. If the part of the plant that you eat is the leaf, it probably got harvested before it had a chance to flower. So, so in theory, if you let your beets bolt, none of your neighbors let their chard bolt, then you're golden. But in practice, if one of your neighbors is going to let their chard bolt. The last line here, caging and hand pollination, that's the advanced seed saving. If any of you, I can't demonstrate it here, but I could talk about it. If you want to do it with squashes, you need to be able to tell a male flower from a female flower. And it's the same with cucumbers and other things in that family. And the way you can tell them apart is that the female flower, the definition of a female flower is that it has an ovary, and on a squash or a cucumber, the ovary is shaped like a tiny little squash or cucumber. It's shaped like the kind of squash or cucumber that it's going to be. So like if it's a patty pan squash, it's going to have this tiny little patty pan squash shape at the base of the flower. The cucumbers over there have a bunch of female flowers on them. They've these tiny little pickling cukes that are about that big. Selection means choosing which parent plants you're going to save seed from to get the ideal characteristics that you want to get. And on the handout it says early fruits, and that's probably kind of intuitive. The tomato plant that makes tomatoes sooner than any other tomato plant, that's the one you want to save seed from. Late bolting greens, that's another thing that you probably want. And that means a lettuce that is less likely to bolt when it gets hot than the other lettuces. And this is a place that can get tricky for some people because, you only have 6 lettuce plants. And if one of them bolts, you're like, oh, well, how about I save seed from it? Because then I can eat the other ones. And the only problem with that is then you're selecting the one that bolted first, and that's not what you want. The things that don't cross with other crops but will give you something are going to be the easiest. Now, lettuces are pretty good at breeding true. I did an experiment about 25 years ago. I can't remember what the two varieties were, but it was in a garden in the same yard, in a garden bed. I planted a big block of red leaf lettuce and a big block of green leaf lettuce. I don't remember what varieties they were, but they were right next to each other. And then the weather got hot and they all bolted, and I thought, I'm gonna save seed from them and keep the plants separate from each other, and then I'm gonna plant some of it out next season and see what happens. And pretty much the seed that I saved from the green lettuce plants gave me green lettuce, and the seed that I saved from the red lettuce plants gave me red lettuce, even though they were flowering right next to each other. The bed was like 8 feet long. So that convinced me, lettuces are reasonably good at breeding true. It's another thing that you'll hear a lot of people say is, don't eat the first tomato because you should save seed from it. That's actually not quite right. You should save seed from that plant if what you want is early tomatoes. But all of the fruits that plant makes are going to have the same genetics. So you can eat the first tomato and then save seed from some other tomato from the same plant. So I want to show you how to tell when the seed pods are ready of things that don't make a fleshy fruit. There's so many examples. This one by Beck right here has a bunch of immature green seed pods on it. You see that? They look like, those. They look like little tiny bean pods. Those are immature Calard pods. And then all the brown rattly ones that are all over the place are mature Calard and kale pods. Some of them have already opened and the seed has fallen on the ground. And then there's a bunch that I harvested already that are in bags in the breezeway that will do a little processing. This plant right here that has the pink ribbon tied on it has some green pods that haven't matured. It has some dry pods that are ready. It has some dry pods that already opened. It's kind of typical they don't all mature at the same time. But I'd say there's kind of two categories for seed harvesting. The ones that are inside a fleshy fruit, where you don't wait for the fruit to be completely dry, and the ones that are a pod, where you wait for the pod to be completely dry. So let's talk about the fleshy fruits. So if it's a fleshy fruit, you need it to be all the way ripe. With some fruits, it's easy to tell if they're all the way ripe. Let's talk about this cucumber. Is it all the way ripe?
It looks like it is. It's a little bit yellow. I don't know.
Do you think it has mature seeds inside it?
Probably.
The spines are off of it unless you rub them off.
That has nothing to do with whether the seeds are mature.
I'm so glad you said that.
Yeah, this is a trick question. Most people don't eat all the way ripe, mature cucumbers that have ripe seeds in them. It probably has seeds in it, but they probably, if you planted them, wouldn't grow. This lemon cucumber I don't have an all the way ripe cucumber to show you. I'm so sorry. I've been eating too many cucumbers this year. This lemon cucumber is closer to being all the way ripe, but when a cucumber is all the way ripe, it's this color.
What? It's yellow?
Yeah, it's bright yellow, orange, and the skin is really tough.
Does it need to be
on the vine?
On the vine.
No, it'll ripen on your kitchen counter.
It doesn't before it rots?
But not in the fridge,
before
right?
it rots. It probably wouldn't ripen in the fridge because cucumbers don't like cold. Yeah, you can pick a green cucumber and put it on your kitchen counter, and because if you wait for it to ripen on the vine, then that vine will stop making the tender green cucumbers that you want to eat. This one is a little overripe in terms of how people like to eat them, but it's not all the way ripe. But yeah, an all the way ripe cucumber is bright yellow orange. It's the color of it. So this might be, I'm not sure, this is a nearly ripe yellow crookneck squash. It's woody. It's not something you want to slice up and put in a salad. A different neighbor gave me this.
It gets mushy inside, doesn't it?
They get kind of like spongy, corky, styrofoamy.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not. It's not the experience most of us are looking for. The skin gets woody, and the inside gets corky and styrofoamy and bitter. It's
Okay.
not usually the experience that we're looking for. If you put it in a soup, you can make it edible, but usually we want our yellow crookneck squash when they're little and tender and very immature. But if you want to save seed, you need to let one of them. So if you take a little tender yellow crookneck squash and put it on your kitchen counter, it will not turn into this. This only happens on the vine. So if you want to save seed from your yellow crookneck squash, you have to let this happen. And actually, this one isn't. This is a different variety. This one, I'm gonna pass that around. That's really woody.
And that's a zucchini.
It
a
might
summer
be.
squash.
It might be. It's definitely a summer. It might be a gourd. This is one I found in a neighbor's free box. So, but that's an example of what an all the way ripe squash is gonna be like. The outside is woody. You can't.
Feels
you
like a
can't cut
winter
through it with your
squash.
thumbnail.
Yeah.
So if you're intending to save the seeds from like that cucumber, you'd want to get it as ripe as possible.
Yeah, you want to get all the
Yeah.
way ripe so that the seeds will be mature.
Okay.
And a cucumber that's gotten over mature on the vine will get the rest of the way mature on the kitchen counter.
Okay.
But it seems like, squashes won't. Like,
You have
you
to-
know,
okay.
you probably know, this is a different topic. This is my October class, is when you harvest your winter squashes, you need them to get all the way ripe on the vine or they won't taste good.
Okay.
And they won't have viable seeds. But cucumbers
Okay.
will do a little bit of, there are fruits that will ripen off the vine or the plant, and there are fruits that won't. And there's a wide range, you know. And I mean, things that are ripened on the plant are always going to be better. You know, like vine ripened tomatoes taste better than windowsill ripened tomatoes. But you can ripen a tomato on your windowsill and it'll have viable seeds. I was going to show how to tell when the lettuces are ripe, which there's lettuces at different stages of maturity, kind of from that end to this end, and there's also cilantro over there to harvest. This one, I think all the seeds are mature. Some of them have already fallen off, so there's going to be volunteered cilantro, coriander, whatever you want to call it, in the walking onion patch. Is you just stick part of it. I don't think I even need the scissors. You just stick it in the bag. And I ended up with about 30 seeds in the bag, so if anybody wants to do that. Yeah, it's a really short-lived plant. I mean, if I want to have cilantro, I want to have like a whole bed of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, help yourself. And then I'll do the lettuce demo. There's these little white pom-poms on it, and those are the mature flowers, kind of like how dandelion flowers turn into those little white pom-poms. They're the same family. You can make lettuce flower wishes. They'd be smaller. They'd be smaller wishes, but you get more of them. And so, wait, this one's the cilantro. I put that one in my pocket, so I mix them together. And so as long as you see some of the little white pom-poms, that means there are some mature seeds. And it may be that the flowers haven't opened yet, though on this one I think it's that a lot of the seeds have already fallen on the ground. There's so much naturalized lettuce in this garden because I do this all the time. And to me that's a good thing. I got lettuce everywhere. And so you do the same thing. You, what I like to do is kind of pull the top together and put the bag over it like a little hat. You don't have to save every single seed. There's thousands. And then bend it over. You can shake it. Or if you, so the lettuce flowers will finish maturing off the plant. So if you snip the top and leave it like that, then you'll get more seeds will fall into the bag. Or you could pull the whole plant up and hang it upside down. But this is a little tidier. Any plant that makes seeds is going to make way more seeds than it needs to make to reproduce itself, with very few exceptions. I mean, there are plants that are really precious that it takes them a long time to flower and they don't make very many viable seeds. But our common vegetables, the ones that make true seeds, make lots of them. It's good to know, like you mentioned potatoes, that there are some vegetables that don't make true seeds. Potatoes, garlic, those are the two most common ones. There are onions that are propagated by bulbs. The those onions over there, they're called Egyptian walking onions, and they're a perennial, and they don't make true seeds either, but they make these little balls on top. The reason it's important to know that is that true seeds need to be stored really dry. Whereas if you take a garlic clove and desiccate it, it won't grow. Leeks make true seeds and cloves. Has anyone ever seen elephant garlic?
Yeah.
Elephant garlic is a leek. So I want to show you, this doesn't really fit tidily into the handout, but I just want to make sure people know what it is. So if you have leeks in your garden, at some point the leek will put up this thing called a scape that has a little thing shaped like a flame on top of it. And if it, on a garlic, that will make top sets, which are tiny, tiny garlic cloves. But on a leek, usually that will make true seeds. And you can break the scapes off and eat them before they turn woody. They're delicious, kind of like garlic scapes, only more leek flavored. But if you don't get them before they turn woody, you can also let them make seeds. Leeks will cross with other leeks, but they won't cross with any other crop. This is 2 bolted leeks. I tied them together with a ribbon so that they wouldn't fall over in the path. I'm allowed to put my feet in the bed so I know where the strawberry plants are. They make these giant pom-poms. So this weird one, the little purple things, those are the flowers. Leek flowers are purple, or usually, sometimes they're white, but they're usually purple. If you've ever seen those giant purple pom-poms that are called ornamental alliums in people's gardens, they're a leek. But some of them are more bred for the ornamental quality, and some of them are more bred for making food. But they're all leeks, and they're all edible, and they all make purple pom-poms. And then the purple pom-pom will turn into this white ball. And then, ooh, there's one that has seeds in it. Here's a little white ball that has a dry, it's turned into a little brown thing. I'll hold it up for the camera and then I'll pass it around. Here's a little brown pod with black seeds inside it. That is a leek seed pod. I was gonna say a leek seed, but I believe there's more than one seed in there, and I can't remember the number. I think it's 3. If they haven't turned brown and they don't have a black seed inside, so I'm gonna say some of them are and some of them are not. There's a lot in here.
You can see the black in some of them.
You can, yeah. I'm gonna pass the whole thing around, and while you have it in your hand, I also, so here's the pom-pom. Some of them are still green and juicy. The white is a papery wrapper, but inside the papery wrapper, it might be green and juicy or it might be brown and have a black seed inside. But the other end, you can see that it has cloves that you could break off and plant.
Oh.
Or you can eat them. So just because the leek has both, so the stem, the part of the leek that we're used to eating is the immature stem. That's gone. This, you can't even cut this with a knife. This is like a piece of wood. I don't want to eat it. But these are like little, very, very mild flavored, leaky garlic cloves. Lettuce is annual. It bolts the same year that you plant it. It makes seeds the same year that you planted it, and then it's dead.
And that bolts every 2.
And leeks and kale and beets and a bunch of other things, you planted it in 2023, and in 2024, it flowers, and then it makes seeds, and then it dies. That's a biennial. It lives for 2 years, as opposed to a perennial, which lives for many or multiple years. Not always many, but multiple years.
Before it goes to seed.
Oh, a perennial could make seeds many, many times. Like a fruit tree is a perennial, or many of the things that we grow for their flowers. An iris, it flowers every year, but the plant doesn't die. The top may be deciduous, but the roots are still alive. Processing seeds is what we're doing next. I'm gonna demonstrate processing a tomato, and then you all get to do it. This is an early girl tomato, and this is the deli tub.
Deli tub?
You know, one of these.
Oh yeah.
What do you call these?
I was thinking about how you were going to operate it. Yeah, just plastic.
I mean, you can use a jar, or a bowl, or whatever.
Deli tub.
If you live with other people, it's nice to use something that has a lid. So if you don't have very many ripe tomatoes, the good news is you can still eat the tomato, just not the seeds. If you want to still eat the tomato, you cut the bottom and you squeeze the juice and the seeds out. Yeah. And again, you don't have to get every single seed.
I thought your hands were gonna get all goopy, but they're
Nope.
not, are they?
Nope. This is not a rotten tomato.
Yeah.
This is just a ripe tomato.
Yeah.
So in the wild, in places where tomatoes are native to, what happens, and with many other plants that make fleshy fruits, is the fruit falls on the ground and rots. And that ferments. And I'll tell you why we're doing this also. So if I just dry this, so these are the seeds and the juice, and you know how the tomato seed has that little kind of mucilaginous shell around it?
Yeah.
The seed will grow better if you ferment this to get rid of the mucilaginous shell. The mucilaginous shell has enzymes in it that prevent the seed from germinating inside the fruit. I have my tomato goo, that's seeds and their gooey coating, and the juice. And then I still get to eat this part of the tomato. And if I didn't want to squish it like that, I could have cut it more carefully and just not tried to get as many of the seeds out. And I could even still like cut it up. You could even like cut the tomato up for a salad and then do what my grandma did and scrape the seeds and the juice off the cutting board, except instead of putting them in the trash, you put them in here. Okay, so here's a tomato. I just need to put this in. Okay. And then you add enough water that it can sit for 4 or 5 days and not get all dried out, which again, it helps if you have a lid on it. It also helps you have a lid on it because the way you can tell it's done is it's got like a white film on the surface. If you don't have a lid, there'll be a bunch of fruit flies. And then 4 days later, I'm gonna pass around my funky fermented early girl tomato, which this one I did not eat the tomato. I put the whole thing in there. I did that on Tuesday. And then you take this and I should have brought more water. Oh, I have another bottle over there. If you're doing it in your kitchen, you need something to pour it into, but since I'm in the garden, I just, yeah, it's not too bad. It smells like rotten tomatoes. Stick. And this big blob of tomato flesh, I probably don't want to eat that.
I'll take it.
You're hungry, Patrick.
Have a plum.
Yeah. So then I've got this, and if I want it to be really clean, I can put it back in here or in something and add more water and swish it around. Rinse and rinse and rinse and rinse and rinse and rinse and rinse. And I mean, it looks like the coating is still kind of there.
It does.
So I might ferment it a little longer. Well, yeah, it's easier to get it off, but not all the way. So, yeah, I think if I want to be absolutely sure, it kind of comes off.
Yeah.
Can you see this little?
Yeah.
It's a little hard to see from way over there, but
There's
there's
a little bit on there.
yeah. All tomatoes are extremely drought tolerant. My last class was on dry farming tomatoes. A lot of people don't believe it. Tomatoes are extremely drought tolerant. You really, really don't have to water them. You could save lots and lots of water by not watering your tomatoes, and lots of blossom end rot as well. But the volunteers are even more drought tolerant. The plants don't get as big, and it's mainly because they germinate later. Because if you're either buying a tomato plant or starting it from seed on purpose, you're probably doing that in February. A tomato seed that's just like in the ground is not going to germinate in February because it's too cold. It's going to germinate in April or May. So the reason that I would want to get the seeds clean is that if I wanted to plant them next year, I want them to be dry. That's the reason to get them clean, but yeah.
So how would you dry them? Just newspaper?
I would just happen to have, if paper works, sometimes they don't take very long. If they have all this tomato schmutz on them, they take longer. Tomato schmutz. But sometimes I do it on paper and sometimes I just do it on a napkin, like that.
Okay.
This method will work for any fleshy fruits.
Okay.
I was taught that it's more important for tomatoes because of the seed-borne diseases. I mean, because I don't really do it when I've saved squash or cucumber seeds and it seems like the seeds germinated fine. And I mean, I didn't like special wash them either. I just scooped them out and dried them before I learned about this, and it still worked. But I can, because they also have that little mucilaginous coat. So I think that would be helpful, you know, if you got the time. And then, yeah, then I just like dump this onto a piece of paper. If it's really wet and you put it on a piece of paper, the piece of paper is going to fall apart, but I have lots of little drying baskets. Yeah. So that, some people call this wet processing. When you're talking about different kinds of seed processing, this is wet processing, as distinct from dry processing, which is what we're going to do with all these things. So this is where, remember at the beginning I said that the first couple seed saving workshops I went to were actually seed cleaning workshops. And you can get some really nice, pretty copper rings with different sizes of metal mesh in them, so that if you're trying to get your seeds really, really clean so that you can start your own seed company and sell them, you'll have these seed packets that have nothing in them but seeds. And then you also might want to like thresh them and winnow them and blow on them to get all the chaff away. For me personally, that doesn't feel necessary. Mainly, the reason to clean the dry seeds is they don't take up so much space. So here are
I like the small
6 little cherry tomatoes, and here are a bunch of different plastic containers that I don't need back. Well, here's the one I did, and I haven't gone through and tried to figure out which lids go to which containers. But what I would do is just squish the tomato rather than try to save the flesh. Okay. So, just to get the sensation of doing it.
Right. That's our first student.
You're gonna try?
Yeah,
Can I
will.
try the X method just because?
Yeah. Because you observed it and you want to practice
want to
the thing you
practice it.
observed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Does it matter which end you do this on?
The blossom end will be easier than the stem end because the stem end has that big lump of flesh and the seeds are at the blossom end.
Oh, wow. Yeah. It's so easy.
Yep.
I thought it would be a big mess.
Lavender seeds grow.
Me too.
But
And cherry tomatoes are so
do
yummy.
you ever have lavender seeds grow?
I've never tried to do lavender from seed. That's kind of in the category of nobody does it from seed because they're so easy to propagate vegetatively.
I have a bag. I was gonna try it.
The other reason to clean seeds is if you feel like they're taking up too much space. You know, if you have a giant jar of kale seed pods and you'd rather it be a small jar of kale seeds. The fluff probably doesn't take up a lot of space, and I have actually found I'm gonna demonstrate cleaning those.
Okay.
Hand picking is the slowest way to clean seeds for sure.
Okay.
But if you enjoy it, there's nothing wrong
Oh, no,
with
no,
it.
no. I'd like to learn
Yeah.
a faster way to do it.
For the lettuce seeds, what I would do is I would take the bag and I would do this. And then and this is getting more of the seeds detached from the stalk.
Right.
And then, if I wanted to have less fluff, and threshing means hitting things to separate the seeds from the inert matter, and then winnowing means blowing on that mixture to get the inert matter to blow away. And so what I just did is a version of threshing. Winnowing is doing this.
Oh.
That's winnowing. Or if it's a windy day, like if you were doing it with grain,
Yeah.
because you don't want a lot of chaff in your food. the traditional thing is to have it on a big, wide basket.
Oh, right.
And then you stand out in the wind and you bobble it like this.
Yeah.
And then the white stuff blows away. The only thing is lettuce seeds are really light.
That's what I was wondering.
So, I mean, they're not as light as the white fluff, but they are quite light. The most important thing when you're doing dry processing is make sure your tools are dry. If there's water in this bowl, then it's not dry processing, then you're getting your seeds wet, and that's no good. And then you can do this for hours. You can crunch these up in here. I'm being kind of cavalier about it because there's so much. Just doing it. See, so there's little black kale seeds and they're falling through the holes. You don't have to save every seed. You don't have to do this whole bag. And there's probably already a bunch of seeds at the bottom of the bag, but you do that. And then look, in the bottom of the bowl there's a bunch of kale seeds. And there's a few pods that snuck through. And for my standards, that's a lot of kale seed if I just want some to plant next year. I'll probably save more than that because I don't do this every year and because I want to give it to other people. But like, that's what I got done in, 30 seconds?
Yep.
I want to talk about seed life and seed storage. So you asked the question and I'll answer it again. How long do seeds stay viable depends partly on how you store them and partly on the species. And there's general guidelines, and then those guidelines are the middle of a range. It's a good but not perfect rule of thumb that bigger seeds will keep longer, like all else being equal. So seeds last longer if they're kept dry, they're protected from moisture, unless you're planting them. And they last longer if they're kept cold, again, unless you're planting them. So like professional seed banks keep them in dry storage in a deep freezer. That will make them last a long time. If you put seeds in the refrigerator, make sure that they're dry before you put them away, and that the whatever container they're in is really moisture proof, because there's moisture in the refrigerator, or it can condense on your jar if your jar isn't sealed. These ones, the seeds are too tiny to inspect each individual seed, so you go by whether the pod is dry, and then you make sure to not get them wet. With seeds that are a little bit bigger, even like the tomato seeds, one of the guidelines for the tomato seed is, especially if you have thumbnails, like if you have a musician in your life who has a thumbnail, you try to pinch them between your nails and bend them. If they break, they're dry enough. So that seed is no longer good, but you presume the ones next to it. If they bend, they're not dry enough. With beans, they should feel hard and rattly. If you can dent them with your thumbnail, then they're not dry enough. With something like lettuce, it's more like, is everything around it dry? Because the seed is so tiny, it's just going to equalize with its environment. And then once you get it dry, then your storage system needs to keep it dry. So, before people, in places where people don't have glass jars, not just before, but like lots of people don't have access to glass jars, and there are traditional ways of storing seeds that keep them dry and somewhat protected from critters. I think I put aromatic leaves in the handout. When I lived in Chiapas 25 years ago, I saw the traditional ways of storing corn and beans, which would be in a hand-thrown ceramic jar that had some kind of top, but it wasn't as tight-fitting as the manufactured lid of a manufactured jar. And then there are aromatic leaves that they would mix all through it that would deter critters, and then they'd make sure that it was in a shed that was really dry, with a good roof on it. And that was adequate for planting things the following season in a climate that was pretty rainy and humid. One of the cool things about seed life is that when you buy a seed packet, those seeds are supposed to have 95% germination, but you're probably gonna not need the number of plants in the seed packet. Your home safe seed won't have 95% germination, but you have a million seeds. And so even if they're old, there's some like carrots, leeks, everything in the carrot family, the seed life is pretty short. If you want to grow parsnips and you want them to get nice and big, you should get fresh seed every year. Leeks, maybe they last like 2 years, but beans, corn, squash, the three sisters, but things with big seeds in general can last a really long time. Many years ago, I lived in a collective house in central Massachusetts where there was like a shoebox in a closet with seeds in it, and there were these Cherokee Trail of Tears seeds that said 1989. It was 2002, but still, they were 13 years old. And the seed packet was kind of like shredded, but it was in Massachusetts where winters are dry and we heated with wood, so that the house kept the house extra dry in the winter, but not in the summer. In the summer it's really humid. And I wanted to plant those beans, and I planted all of them, and I did not scientifically mark every single seed, but I got a nice crop of beans, a nice bed of bean plants, and then a decent crop of beans. So, and my other fun story about seed life is a friend from grad school. I was an ecology graduate student. He was an archaeology graduate student. His professor specialized in food archaeology in Bolivia, and in a I'm so appalled when I talk about archaeologists robbing graves. It was 30 years ago, things we weren't thinking about. Anyway, she robbed somebody's grave and found some corn and bean seed that was 1,000 years old by carbon dating.
Wow.
And did a germination test, which is where you soak it and put it in a petri dish and keep it evenly moist, but not in water. And she got 1% germination from these 1,000-year-old seeds.
Wow.
Wow.
So I can show you my seed storage, which BC, I would just invite people into the kitchen. It'll be a little crowded to look at my seed cabinet. If folks prefer, I could also I can't bring everything out, but I could bring a few things out. Basically, there's a bunch of pill bottles and glass jars and packets in larger plastic, and cookie tins. In our climate, cookie tins protect seeds from critters, and they're not like completely moisture proof, but they're fine, you know. It's not like a kitchen cabinet that's not down on the floor is usually dry enough in our climate to store seeds. They don't have to be in the refrigerator. So I just keep my seeds in the kitchen cabinet. This is a supplement bottle repurposed as snap peas that we grew in the spring. This is a cookie tin. It says MED, which stands for medicinal. So there are a bunch of different seed packets of medicinals in there. That one, my roommate labeled flower seeds. So there's a bunch of different packets in a cookie. So it's kind of organized by category. This one says warm season. This used to be cool season. These are empty packets. They say seed sharing packets. So if someone wants to take some seeds, I have a bunch of empty packets you can use. And if we run out of those, there's lots of other stuff. Went to a seed swap and someone had these really cute little things. Just say like one cool thing they got out of the day, learning or otherwise.
I think for me, it's like the wider lens of like community. There was something you said about growing seeds in community and just like how we can work together really well for that, and that's really important to me, and I'm feeling like I'm striving toward having that, a more intimate community of people who are gardening and growing food together. So just like more reminders of that is really good for my spirit.
It was really cool to be able to like connect the dots between like information I already had and like the missing pieces and stuff to sort of build up my knowledge better, and I'm really excited about the drought tolerant tomato information. I love tomatoes, so I was like, oh, something new.
A lot, the confidence to feel like I could save seeds and to try, and the knowing how to, and that there's dry seed saving and wet seed saving, and the timing with it. I feel like the resources of the handout and the books that you've shared, and future classes and things like that. So lots of things to take away.
So I've been longing for someone who can teach not just from a book, but can pass on this kind of information and kind of mentor. And, you know, when you're trying to just start out, you don't even know where to start growing in your yard. Where's the best place to grow in your yard? How, companion planting, all these questions. Gardening is hard work if you don't have some of that wisdom, and it's work anyway, but yeah, this is just lovely.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
I'm really grateful that you all came to make, because this is what this space is for. So when we started this place in 2007, it wasn't just like, let's have a garden and grow food so we can eat it. It was more like, let's have a garden and grow food so other people can eat it and learn. And so I'm really grateful when I feel like that's happening.